This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We're learning Sefer Nechemia, Parak Yud Beis, Pasuk Chav Zayin. We know that Thursday is Asar B'Teves, which means tomorrow, Wednesday, is the 9th day of Teves, and is actually the yard site of Ezra HaSefer. Tomorrow, the 9th of Teves, and we're going to say it in the Slichos, the 9th of Teves was the yard site of Ezra HaSefer. But what's very amazing, and I discovered this morning, is that today is the 8th of Teves. And the 8th of Teves is the yard site of Nechemia. Today is the yard site of Nechemia. So, what better thing to learn on the yard site of Nechemia than Sefer Nechemia? How many people could say that they learn on Ches Teves, on the yard site of Nechemia, Sefer Nechemia? So it's mamish hashkacha that we should be able to learn this today. Okay, so we're up to Parak Yud Beis, Pasuk Chav Zayin. Uvechanukas Choymas Yushalayim. Now we're talking about the restoration of the wall of Yerushalayim by the inauguration of the wall of Yerushalayim. Bikshu es haLeviyim. They searched for the Leviyim, Mikal Mekaymoisam, from all their places, Lahaviyim Yerushalayim, to bring them to Yerushalayim, La'asos Chanukah, to make a Chanukah, to make an inauguration, V'simcha, and a joyous occasion, Uvesoidos, with bringing the carbon taida, Uveshir, with song, Mitzaltayim, cymbals, Nevalim, Nevel, Uvechinar, and with lurs. Now, very interesting. What exactly were they doing? It seems like they were re-sanctifying the city of Yerushalayim. Why did it need to be re-sanctified? Yerushalayim is Kidsha L'Shaita, the Kidsha L'Asalave, the Kedusha of Yerushalayim is eternal. The Rambam says that this process was just a ceremonial act, but it was not actually that they were sanctifying Yerushalayim, because after all, you need a melech, you need a Sanhedrin, you need other criteria that they didn't have at this time. You need Urim V'Tumim, and all of these things were missing. So they didn't actually sanctify Yerushalayim. This is merely a ceremonial ritual. Okay? Now, we're going to see that when you bring a carbon taida requires 40 loaves. How many of the loaves are chalois, and how many of them are matzah? Well, 10 and 30. 30 matzah and 10 chametz. Okay? 10 chametz.
It's the other way? It's the other way around. 30 matzahs and 10 chametz?
30 matzahs and 10 chametz. Right?
10 chametz?
30 matzahs and 10 chametz. That's what I said, I think.
They don't have no chametz.
Well, it doesn't mean they were makriv it just that's accompanied it.
They bring it.
Okay? So they're going to be sanctifying the Yerushalayim through the carbon taida, and they're going to be walking and encircling around Yerushalayim. Vayeyasvu, and they gathered Bnei HaMesharim, the sons of the singers, Umin HaKikar, who lived in the plain Svivos Yerushalayim, surrounding Yerushalayim, Umin Chatzrei Netoifasi, from the place called Chatzrei Netoifasi, and they came from Mibeis HaGilgal, Umisudais Geva, V'Yazmaves, Ki Chatzerim, because open cities, Banu Lahem, they built for themselves, HaMesharim, the singers, Svivos Yerushalayim, around Yerushalayim. Vayitaharu HaKohanim v'Haleviyim, the Kohanim and the Leviyim purified themselves. Vayitaharu Asam, they purified the people. V'Yas HaSha'arim, and the gates, V'Yas HaChoim, and the wall. Now what does it mean they purify themselves? Well, Rashi says first they purified themselves and then they purified others. What did they purify the walls of Yerushalayim and the gates of Yerushalayim from? They purified it that there should not be any tumah. They removed any shratzim, any dead carcasses, any matters that would create a problem of tumah from the walls, from the surrounding environs of Yerushalayim. Okay. That's what we read last time. Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Va'ala, and I brought up, says Nechemia. Again, we mentioned, today says Yartzeit, Ches Teves. Va'ala, I brought up Sarah Yehuda, the officers of Yehuda, Me'al l'chayma. Now, Me'al l'chayma is an unusual expression. What does it mean, Me'al? Well, the Malbim says that the word Me'al could have one of two meanings. If you look at the Malbim Pasuk Lamanaf, Me'al l'chayma yesh l'faresh shahalchu al hachayma mamish. They walked on the top of the wall. Right? The wall has,
They walked on.
in other words, a walkway toward the top, the ramparts, and they walked on the top of the wall. V'yesh l'farish, another explanation is eitzel hachayma, near the wall. Kamoi v'olav mate menashe. Right? You ever hear in there's an expression in the Torah, v'olav, in Bamidbar. V'olav doesn't mean Menashe stood on top of another shevet. It means they encamped next to another shevet. It wasn't he had one shevet and then Menashe, they stood on top of the other guys. They did so next to them. Says the Malbim, the truth is be'emes nestapik b'zeh haritva b'chidusha perkam d'shvois. The Ritva actually debates this, and he wants to prove that they walked on the wall mamish to sanctify the windows and the width of the wall. Now, actually, if you look in the Gemara in Shavuos, Anaf Tes Vav Amud Aleph, we're going to see that it's Machlekes Rishonim. Did they walk on the outer perimeter of the wall, or did they walk on the inner perimeter of the wall? It's Machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says they walked around it on the outside, and Tosfos says they walked on the inner perimeter. Okay, now listen carefully. What did they do? Says Nechemia, Amida, I stood up, shtei tzaidos, two taidos, gedolos, very big. I stood up two big taidos. Now, when we say he stood up two taidos, normally the carbon taida refers to the animal part of the carbon taida. Carbon taida has a behema, and accompanying the behema, you have 10 matzos and 10 chametz and 30 matzos. Yeah? 10 chametz and 30 matzos. Well, the 10 chametz, each one of the 10 chametz was the size of 3 matzos. So in other words, you had 30 matzos, 10 chametz. The 10 chametz was the size of 3 matzos. So the 10 of the chametz were equal to the 30 matzos. So when Nechemia says he took 2 taidos gedolos, what does that mean? He took 2 taidos gedolos? 2 large loaves of chametz. After all, the chametz loaves were the size of 3 matzos. So he took 2 loaves, and we're going to see he's going to carry the loaves as part of this ritual around the walls of Yerushalayim. Now, the Malbim brings down that Chazal have a Kabbalah that these taidos were mamish carbon taida, and they were needed to sanctify the city. And in order to do that, they had to walk around the city with the lachmei taida. Why are they called gedolos? Because each lechem chametz was made from an isarin of flour, but a lachmei matzah was made out of a third of an isarin. And we have a Kabbalah that the 2 taidos walked one next to each other, or one after each other. One was eaten and one was burnt.
If the chametz had 3 times as much flour as the matzah,
Yeah.
it would have been a lot bigger than 3 times the size of a matzah, because so the size would have been a lot bigger than 3 times the size of a matzah.
Maybe when we say it was bigger, it means not in weight, not just in physical side. Now, I'm sure you remember in Parag Gimel. Who remembers from Parag Gimel of Nechemia? Where was Nechemia's house in the walls of Yerushalayim?
In the center of the city's west wall. I'm sorry, I'm reading it. I haven't.
Okay, good. So it was in the Shar Hagai, which was the middle of the west.
I got you.
Okay? Now, let's learn now what the procession is with how they're going to walk around the gates of the city. The walls of the city. You ready for this? Let's back to the pasuk. V'sahaluchais. V'sahaluchais means, and then the march. Rashi says, V'chashar yatsu min ha'ir, kedei l'soiviva, when they walked out of the city to encircle it, holchu l'tzad yamina, they went to the right. So Rabbi say, if Nechemia's house is in the west, and you walk out of the house, and you make a right, what direction are you going?
South.
South.
No, north.
No, going south.
If no,
Did you come out of the house?
It depends on
it depends which direction you
or
are.
outside of the city?
If you walk out of a west gate and you make a right, you're going north.
So you're outside of the city.
But it depends. If you're facing Nechemia's house and you make a right, then you're going south.
So, did Nehemiah's house have an entrance in the city and outside of the wall?
Apparently it did.
So where do they go out of? That's your question.
So Rashi Masechta Shavuos says, when it says they went right, it means they faced.
Open it and say hello.
Could you hold, please?
They faced the right of the city. So if the guy in the Shara, someone was facing the Shara guy, and he went right, so then he'd be going to the south. Okay? That's what Rashi says in Masechta Shavuos. V'salucha islayamin, they went to the right, me'ala chayma, from near the wall, l'shar ha'ashbais, to the gate of the garbage, to the refuse gate.
That's on the east wall.
Okay?
Or if it's the same gate that I'm thinking.
Well, this would still be in the west.
Yeah.
The west. And who went? Vayilach achareim, they went after them. Hoshaya v'chatzi sara Yehuda, and half the officers of Yehuda. Who else? Va'azariah, Ezra, u'Meshulam. Yehuda, u'Vinyamin, u'Shmaya, v'Yirmiyah. U'mibnei ha'kohanim b'chatzotzos. And then the children of the Kohanim came with trumpets. Why were they blowing trumpets? Look at the Rabbi. The Rabbi says, says Rabbi, this is a command in the Torah for Kohanim to blow trumpets. Because the Torah says, Kain Sivsa Torah, that's what the Torah commands. Sheyu HaKohanim toikim b'chatzotzos, the Kohanim should sound the trumpets. Al zivchei hashlamim, when a carbon shlomim is brought, and a carbon toida rabboisai is a type of shlomim. The Rambam learns that a carbon toida is a kind of shlomim. And the Torah commands kohanim to blow chatzotzos when a shlomim is brought. Now, even though it's not exactly true, because kohanim only have to blow trumpets by a shlomim that has a specific day requirement. This shlomim was not tied down to any specific day, but nevertheless, the framework of this carbon was one of a shlomim. It says Rabbi, and also the kohanim are commanded to blow chatzos on a day of happiness, and this was certainly a day of happiness. Chanukas chomas Yerushalayim. It's a very interesting thing when you think about what happened on Asar B'Teves.
Destruction.
Asar B'Teves, the walls of Yerushalayim were sieged. During which Beis HaMikdash?
That's tricky.
First.
During the first.
The first, yeah.
Times of
It
Mechanetzar.
wasn't the second.
And Nechemia, whose yard site was Ches Teves, but the Chassam Sofer says a very interesting thing. We find by Tisha B'Av that 5 tragedies happened on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, right? 2 Batei Mikdashim, and Chet Hamaraglim, and Beitar, and Tornas Rufus plowed over the ground of the Beis HaMikdash. Those 5 tragedies happened on on Tisha B'Av. And then another 5 tragedies happened on Yud Zayin Tammuz, right? What were they? The luchos were broken, and the walls of the Beis Hamikdash were breached, and Nisrufa HaTorah, Behemet Tselem Behechal, and Batla HaTamid. Those are the they put a Tselem in the Hechal. Yeah? So you have 5 tragedies on Shavas B'Tammuz, 5 tragedies on Tisha B'Av. How many tragedies on Asar B'Teves? Only 1. There, they surrounded the walls.
But they say that's the biggest one, because that's the beginning of the.
Okay, very nice. But we have other tragedies that surround the day of Asar B'Teves. The 9th of Teves is the yahrzeit of Ezra. The 8th of Teves is the yahrzeit of Nechemia, and they also translated the Torah into Greek. That's today. Why is it that when it comes to Asar B'Teves, the tragedies didn't all happen on that one day? The same way by Tisha B'Av, all 5 on one day. Yud Zayin Tam was all 5 on one day. Why not by Asar B'Teves, all 5 on one day? Why were they spread out over the course of different days?
Well, the 2 yard sites is a tragedy, but it's not. Is it on the same par?
We mention them in the Slichos, so obviously it's connected to Asar B'Teves. But I mean, why would it be connected? It's not even the same day. Why mention it on Asar B'Teves? Because it's around the same time. Well, if there's an idea, Megalgal and Chayva L'Yom Chayiv, so why didn't it happen that day? Chassam Sofer says a very interesting thought, that Asar B'Teves is a fast day that has nothing to do with the day of the month. It's not the 10th of Teves. It's the 98th day of the year. And the year that Ezra passed away, he passed away on the 98th day of the year. And the year Nechemia passed away, he passed away on the 90th day of the year. When Ezra passed away, it was Tes. When Nechemia passed away, it was Ches. When the walls were sieged, it was Yud. It could be, depending on Malei Chasar, the 98th day could be one of 3 days. But it's the only fast day that's not the day of the month, it's the 98th day of the year. So it comes out really.
Well, if it's the 98th day of the year, it shouldn't be the same day every year, because the 98th day of the year also.
Yeah, but in our calendar we had to keep it fixed.
Couldn't keep track of it.
But it comes out then really Nechemia's yahrzeit is the same day that the walls were surrounded. So it's interesting that if you would ask what was Nechemia's greatest accomplishment, it was probably the refortification of the walls of Yerushalayim. So interestingly, on the day that the walls were surrounded, that's the day we commemorate Nechemia's life, who refortified the same walls. So it comes out a very interesting thing, that the day that we mourn what happened on Asar B'Teves is also the day we remember what Nechemia did to restore those walls. Okay, so back to the Psukim.
I told them on the fully that it's not that, it's 98.
It's the 98th day of the year.
Yeah,
The Gematria,
but
Chinam is 98.
That's all nice, but when you look at calendars, it's
We don't observe yahrzeits that way. So many
you
days
don't
of the
observe
year.
anything that way.
That's why the Navi tells Yecheskel, K'soiv l'cha be'etzem hayom hazeh. It's meduyok in the Navi that you have to write. It's not the day of Yom HaChodesh. It's etzem hayom. It's the very day. It's the 98th day. Okay. So he says over here, V'mnei HaKahanim b'chatzotzos, the Kahanim blew chatzotzos, Zechariah ben Yonasan, Zechariah the son of Yonasan, ben Shemaiah the son of Shemaiah, ben Matanya, ben Michaya, ben Zakor, ben Asaph. V'Yechav and his brothers, Shemaiah, V'Azarel, Milalai, Gilalai, Moai, Nesanel, V'Yehuda, Chanani. What did they do? B'chlei Shiur David Ish Holikim. With the Klei Shiur of David, the man of God. What does that mean? B'chlei Shiur David Ish Holikim. So, I believe there are.
David's quite shit. Oh no, they kill him.
The Ralbag says, "B'chlei Shiur David Ish Holikim, Hine Hiskin David Shirim. David enacted songs. L'hodos Hashem Yisrach, to thank Hashem. V'hayanesunim Hashirim Haim. Those songs were given L'menatzchem, to the conductors, Al Kelim Yuchadim, with special instruments. In other words, B'klei, they played it with instruments. What did they play? Shiur David Ishalakim, the songs of David. In other words, you make like a comma. B'klei, they played it with vessels. And what did they play on those vessels? Shiur David Ishalakim. However, Rabbi say, the Metzudos learns they actually had the instruments of David HaMelech. The Metzudos says, Holchu b'kli shir shel David. Okay. V'al shar ha'ayin. They then went to the gate of the spring. V'negdam alu, and they went further, al malois ir David, by the steps of the city of David, b'ma'aleh lachayma, by the steps of the wall. Rashi says, those steps were part of the wall. Me'alaves David, near the house of David, v'yad shar hamayim, until the gate of the water, Mizrach to the east. So remember, Nechemia lived on the west, the west side, not the upper west side. He lived on the west side of the wall. Yeah, so he made a right. That means he was going south. Then he goes toward from the west to the east. Rabbi said the Malbim learns that the other group, there was another group that made a left out of Nechemia's house, and they went around the northern part, and then they both met on the eastern side. But not everyone learned. Some learned they went all the way around. Okay. So I'm sorry. Back to Pasuk Lamed Vav, they played the klei shir of David Ishalakim. Ve'ezra haSofer Lefneim, Ezra walked before them. Ve'al shar ha'ayin, they went further to the gate of the eye, of the spring. V'negdam alu, they went further al malos ir David, by the ascent of the city of David. B'malo lachema, the steps of the wall. Me'alu beis David, near the house of David. Ve'ad shar ha'mayim mizrach. Ve'hatoida hashenis. The second carbon taida. Rashi learns there were two carbon taidas brought, and they walked side by side.
Here in English it says, it doesn't say where it's from, but it says at the head of the procession, Ezra led one company and Nechemia the other. But there's no source cited for it.
Yeah, I don't know where that's from. But the Rashi learns there were two carbon taidas, and the procession was led by two people carrying loaves from two different carbon taidas. But the Malbim has another very interesting pshat, and the Malbim learns that one individual was carrying 5 loaves from the second carbon taida, and someone else was carrying 5 loaves from the first carbon taida. The Malbim says, "V'ha'emes hu shechilku es hashtei taidos." They divided the two taidas. Shahaya b'chol echad asar chalos. Each one had 10 loaves. They took 5 loaves from each taida, and they encircled the city on the right to the south, and they took 5 from each, and they circled from the north. In other words, the Malbim learns there were 2 carbon taidas. Each one had 10 loaves. 5 were taken from, but of lechem. So they took 5 from each, and they went to the south. They took 5 from each, and they went to the north. The hatoida hashenis, the second toida. Hahileches lemoil, that walked opposite him. In other words, Rashi learns side by side, or the Malbim learns one behind the other. Vani achareha, says Nechemia, I'm after it. I went after it. He says, Vani hayisi hoylech achareha shel taida. I went behind the carbon taida. V'chatzi ha'am, and half the people, me'al la'achayma, near the wall, L'migdal HaTanur, by the tower of the ovens, V'yad ha'chayma harachava, till the broad wall. This is how the Malbim learns. The Malbim learns, and Pasuk Lamed Beis, it says, Vayelech achareim Hoshaya v'chatzi sara Yehuda, half the officers of Yehuda went to the right. So now in this Pasuk, Pasuk Lamed Ches, when it says v'chatzi ha'am me'al ha'chayma, it's referring to the other half of the people that went to the left. In other words, the Malbim learns that they split up. They went to the left, they're going toward the north side. Me'al migdal ha'tanurim, near the tower of the ovens, v'yad ha'chayma rachava, to the broad wall. U'me'al l'shar Ephraim. Then, from the gate of Ephraim, v'yal shar ha'yeshana, by the old gate, v'yal shar ha'dogim, by the fish gate, u'migdal chananel, near Migdal Chananel, u'migdal hameya, v'yad shar ha'tzayin, to the gate of the sheep, v'yamdu, and they stood b'shar ha'matara, by the gate of the prison. That's where the two groups met, by the prison gate. Who was in prison there? Nobody that I know personally.
Why would there be a prison in
the gates of Yerushalayim? Well, the gates were probably fortified, and if you need to keep a criminal in somewhere safe, that might have been a good place. Okay. V'ata'amoidna, and shtei ha'taidas, the two taidas stood beveis holikim, by the house of God. Va'ani and I v'chatzi haskanim imi, with half of the assistants with me. The ha'kayhanim, and the kayhanim, Eliakim, Ma'aseya, Minyamin, Michaya, Elyoyenai, Zechariah, Hananya, Bachatzoitzes, they blew the trumpets. O Ma'aseya, Ushemaya, Ve'elazar, Ve'uzi, Ve'hoichanan, Umalkiya, Ve'elam, Ve'azar, Vayashmiu. The Metsudai says, Vayashmiu is a name. Cain Shemish, his name was Yashmiu. Vayashmiu, and the man Yashmiu. But the Malbim says, no, there's no name Yashmiu. Yashmiu means, Vayashmiu ha-meshorim. The meshorim, the singers, made themselves heard. The Yizrachaya ha-pakid. And Yizrachaya was the officer. Vayizbechu b'yemahu, and they slaughtered on that day Zvachim Gedolim, great karbanos, meaning fat animals. Vayismachu, and they were happy. Ki oleikim simcham, God made them rejoice, simcha gedolah, with a great happiness. V'gam hanoshim, and even the women, v'hayiladim, and the children, samechu, they also rejoiced. V'tishama simchas Yishalayim meirachak, the happiness of Yerushalayim was heard from far away. By the way, the Malbim points out that their simcha was not through their eating, but it was a simcha of God. It was a spiritual simcha. Ki holekim simcham, God made them rejoice. Vayipaktu b'yemahu, and they appointed on that day anoshim, men, al ha-nishachais, on the nishachais. Rashi says the word nishachais is like lishachais, the chambers, because a nun and a lamed could be interchanged. So they appointed men over chambers, la'itzarais, for the storehouses. Now what does this mean? So the Malbim has a big chiddush over here. You ready for this? The Malbim says if you look back in Parak Yud, Pasuk Lamed Chesem Lamed Tes, the Malbim points out that the way things used to be was that if Leviim, Kohanim, needed Truma or Meiser, how would they get it? They would have to go out and get it.
Where would they get it from?
In other words, if a Kohen or a Levi wanted Meiser or Truma, they would go knock on the house of the Yisrael and say, "You have any Truma for me? Any Meiser for me?"
I gave it the last week.
So you say, you make up above Meiser, you say you gave it already, or maybe you did.
Gave it to the office.
But in other words, it used to be the Kohanim and Levim had to solicit it. Nechemia made a takana that the Yisraelim would bring the Truma and the Meiser to storehouses by the Mikdash, and the Kohanim and Levim who were there anyway could just partake of it. So it would free them up to be able to do that with Hashem without having to go around collecting the handouts.
Also, 3 Israelim could give it to one of the same Cohen or Levi. I mean, that's not equitable.
Right? So they appointed people on the storehouses where they would store Truma. Look in the Pasuk. They appointed on that day Anoshim, men al haneshachas over the storehouses, lo itzarais, the chambers of the storehouses, la Trumais for Truma, la Reishis. Reishis are for the Bikurim. The Metzudah says Reishis are the Chala, refers to Chala. V'la Masrois, and the Meiser, Lichnois Bahem, for them to gather, Listei Ha'arim, to the fields of the cities, Menois HaTorah, the portions of the Torah, which means the Bikurim are, they would bring it up originally on Shavuos, but it would go to the Kohanim, and it was gathered Listei Ha'arim from the fields. Menois HaTorah, the portions of the Torah, like Kohanim v'Alavim, ki simchas Yehuda, the joy of Yehuda ala Kohanim v'Alavim ha'imdim, were upon the Kohanim and Levim who stood there on guard. And these Kohanim and Levim, vayishmu mishmeres Elokehem, they guarded the guard of Hashem, mishmeres HaTahara. What does it mean they guarded the guard of Hashem? That means they guarded the Beis HaMikdash literally. The Rambam says, "Hu shmiras Beis Elokim." They literally guarded the Beis HaMikdash, because the Rambam says the Beis HaMikdash, even if it was not in danger of being attacked, it lends a certain honor when there are guards. Sometimes you have a guard not just for protection; it lends a degree of importance to the building that's being guarded. And what does it mean? Umishmeres HaTahara. They guarded the Mikdash, that it should remain pure, that no people are tummy would enter. The Hashorim, also the singers and the gatekeepers did their jobs, Kemitzvas David, as the command of David, Shlomo Benoi, and Shlomo his son. What does that mean, as the command of David and Shlomo his son? David commanded his son Shlomo to divide the Kohanim and Levim into different mishmaros. Ki bimei David, because in the days of David, ve'asaf, and Asaf mikedem, from before, from the early days, Rashi HaMesharim, the heads of the singers, v'shir tehillah, and the songs of praise, v'hodos, and thanks, le'elokim, to God. Now Asaph was a Levi, and he became a Navi. So what does it mean? Mikedem Rashi HaMashayrim. David and Asaph were the heads of the singers in ancient times. It says the Malbim, that Asaph was appointed from the times of old to be the heads of the singers.
That mitzvah Yosef?
I believe so. So says the Malbim, until this time, they used to give the gifts to the gatekeepers, but the Levium would take the Meiser in the fields, and then the Levium would give the Meiser and the Meiser to the Bnei Aaron. But now they were Masakin. You don't give it to Levium who are going collecting. You would give it to officers, and they would in turn give it to the Levium. So the last pasuk of the parak says, "V'chol Yisrael, and all the Jews b'mei Zerubbabel uv'mei Nechemia, noisnim menoyes hamashayrim, gave the gifts to the singers, v'hasharim, and the gatekeepers, v'ayom b'yoymai. They gave a daily allowance. Umakdishim la'Leviim, they would sanctify their gifts to Leviim, and they in turn, the Leviim makdishim l'vnei Aaron, and Leviim would in turn give trumas meiser to the kohanim." And this was all part of the enactment of Nechemia, that Nechemia upheld the walls of Yerushalayim, and he also strengthened the distribution of Trumas HaMaisros.
He also made this big celebration, eh?
And this fits in very well with what the Malbim said, and this is one of the most important comments on Sefer Ezra Nechemia. The Malbim in Sefer Ezra in Parak Zayin said that Shimon HaTzadik was Mishiarei Knesses HaGdoila, who said the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. Why did Shimon HaTzadik say this? Because in the days of the Anshe Knesses HaGdoila, these three Amudim were fortified. Ezra fortified the Amud of Torah. Ezra strengthened the Torah. He wrote the Torah, he taught the Torah, he made Gzeros. Zerubbabel and Yeshua ben Nun, Yeshua Kohen Gadol, they built the Beis HaMikdash, and they strengthened Avodah. And Nechemia, he strengthened Gemilas Chasadim. How? Because he involved himself in social welfare and in the benefit of society by fixing the walls of Yerushalayim, and as we're learning now, making sure that the handouts, the gifts, were given in a better way. Instead of having the Levium going around collecting it, he made it that they could stay and do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, and the gifts were brought to a central location. Okay, we'll hold it over here. So I think in Mitzvah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem, we should finish maybe in 2 weeks.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.